Hillary and I are here today for this session on quizzes. What I want to be able to do today is start off with kind of an overview of it to kind of give us that foundation, and then we'll dive into it a little more deeply. So here's our quizzes. And this is Hillary with love in her eyes because she loves quizzes so much. And these are our quizzes in D2L. We're particularly talking about that tool that you can use there. Our objectives today are to discover, create, and collect. And I noticed that I probably should have had a T in here somewhere because then it would have been DTCC, but alas, it's just DCC. We want to start off with discovering different quiz items and the possibilities that we can have with those quiz items. We want to be able to learn about creating quiz items, especially maybe for question libraries or drawing from question libraries, because collect is being able to collect those quiz items from our question libraries. Because I think for some of our departments, there are question libraries that are available, and we need to know how to draw those questions into our quizzes in our own courses. So the first thing we want to do is discover the quiz items. There's a large variety of quiz items that are available to you. You can see them in this image here, but for instance, you have your true false, your multiple choice, the ones you might expect, but there are fill in the blanks, matching questions. You can have a wide variety of quiz items. When you're creating your quiz, you do want to determine your purpose behind the item. So when you are designing an item, you want to decide, what's my purpose? How am I evaluating my student learning? And what's the best way for me to do that? And when you're trying to determine the best method for determining your student understanding, it might not be the one that's the most convenient to grade. So try to think about when a multiple choice question is appropriate versus when maybe you need a written response question. And I'll say this also because I remember having a psychology professor who had quizzes, tests that we would have that had 62 items on them, and they were all true false. Why 62? I don't know. Sometimes we'd have a 93 item quiz or test that would be all true false. Everything was true false. And it really was a miserable experience. And I don't think it really gave us that opportunity to really truly demonstrate our understanding. So you do want to think about a variety of quiz items to help facilitate students being able to show you what they know. So when you're looking at creating items for a question library, the value of this is creating items that can be used again and again in subsequent courses or in a different course. And one of the things this also helps is if you're developing a question library as a department or for multiple sessions of a course, you can ensure accessibility to those items. And when I say that, for instance, if you want to use an image in the item, I don't want you to be afraid to use that image because you're worried about accessibility. All you have to do is make sure that you provide alternative text for that image, or in a description of the item, you can describe the image that you're using. Don't be afraid to use those types of questions though, because they can be such rich experiences, rich questions for students. Just be ready to explain the item or explain the image if that's needed. And then you can use a variety of items. Again, we saw all those different types of quiz items that you can use. And then when you have a question library, you can collect items from the library. So you can draw those items right out of the library. And then if you need another question item to address what you had taught, you can add items also to your quiz. And you can edit any of those items that you need to. Now, let's say if you're going to do some major edits on the item, then the item was probably not the right one to use anyway. You'll just want to create your own. But if there was a typo in it by accident, you can definitely fix the typographical error. You can also, maybe for your cohort of students, you understand feedback that they need. And I'll show you what that means to be able to add feedback to an item as well. And then what we'll do is we're going to dive into some quiz creation in action. Are there questions before we do? And I think Hillary's going to help monitor the chat too to make sure we address those if we need to. So at the top, our first impulse might be to create a new quiz, but new quiz, I want to show you the values of the question library. So let's jump into the question library. When you go in there, you can see that there's lots of items in here already, because I've presented a couple of times on quizzes and I was practicing a whole lot for this presentation. So there's lots of examples in here. When you look, you'll first see some regular items here. But then under there, you'll see some files that are sections that I can collect my questions in. Those are also on the left-hand side to ease that navigation. But that's why you see some of these funny ones with a question mark, is because those are just random items that I had put in there before I started classifying them. When I click the new button, I can choose my question type. But I did want to point out that at the top, it doesn't look like it means anything, but that's where you create your new section. In your new section, that might be where you are trying to decide how you're going to group your questions. So remember, on the side, I had those folders that said economics, Psych 101, something like that. This is where you might decide to put in Unit 1. You might want more description than that, depending upon what question library you're building. It might be Math 101, Unit 1, because you're trying to create that section, and these questions under there would be questions that I would have there. You can hide the section title from learners. I'll kind of show you what that means a little bit more. You can provide some text that would describe it. You can shuffle just within this section, but those are all things that you can play with to decide what you like. When you hit save, we'll look down at the bottom and we'll see that we have a new folder there. It also appears on the side. When we click on that folder, it's empty. We haven't put any questions in there yet. So we need to start to put some questions in there. In new, now we can try to choose the questions that we want. So if we choose a true-false question, for instance, we talked about those, we could provide in there, and this is my Math 101 Unit 1, that we could say the answer to 2 plus 2 is 4. We could say that's true or that's false. We indicate the correct answer in these circles. And then under feedback, this is where I had told you that you could provide feedback for students. We could say absolutely correct. We could add into this feedback if they chose the wrong one. Remember that we need to use one-to-one relationships, right? So we can talk about, we can refer to something we did in Unit 1. We could even, the nice part about this, we can even put a link in there to Unit 1 so they can go back and review. Or we could add a video link in there so that they could go back and they could review and get this question right in the future. So those are the ways that you can support your students. You can also have overall feedback that is provided for everyone regardless of their answer. Under this options blue part, you can choose to remove the feedback. So you don't have to have feedback. You can add a hint. You can say, this is a basic math question, or whatever, so people don't think you're trying to trick them. You can add a short description. This enumeration, what that does is, here, I'll notice here's my preview. It shows me what my question will look like. If I choose add enumeration, it added that A, B. So that's kind of the difference if you want to have a choice of A, choice of B. And you can choose what that looks like here in a drop-down menu with, say, capital letters instead. Whatever choice you like the best. You can decide how many points it's worth, and you can click Save. And then you'll see that that question is going to be in your question library. Okay, so we'll add a couple more just so we can play with them. We have multiple choice questions here. And maybe in our multiple choice question, we might talk about a square has how many sides? And I know I'm doing very basic questions here. So it has 3, it has 2, it has 4, it has 1. If I wanted to rearrange those, I can just do it here on the screen. I choose the one that's correct. I can have more answers if I want by adding an answer, or if I only want 3 choices, I can get rid of one of them. This is the nice thing that I like about this too. You can randomize the answer order, and you can choose again the default points. You can decide if it says A, B, C, on the side, or if it said 1, 2, 3, which with numbers, I think that's really confusing. So ABC is better. But then you can save. And we have another question. And just one more, a multi-select question. This is where they can choose more than one. Math is best on, we can say Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. I only want the 3 answers, Monday, Tuesday, Friday. When I get here, this is where they can check more than one answer. That's why they have check boxes on the side instead of those circle radio buttons. I can also decide they have to get this right. And I'm going to say, I think math's best on Mondays and Tuesdays. I don't want to do math on Fridays, right? And that's what I think that they should have learned that in my lecture, right? So this is where it is. So I can decide they have to get all of it right. They have to choose Monday and Tuesday, or they get nothing right for this question. I can choose, well, here's my correct selections. They are a third because there are 3 choices there. So they could get a third of their points. Their correct answers could be half. If I only if I only allow points for the correct answers, there were only 2, so it's half and half. Or they could get minus for the wrong selections. The thing that I like about this, I want you to remember, it says 0.3, 0.5, and 0.3. If I add an answer and I say, well, Wednesdays are good too. Wednesdays are good too. Remember, I like them in order. I can click here, all or nothing. Now you notice that it changed it to 0.25 because there are 4 choices. There are only 3 correct answers, so it's a third there. And then it's plus or minus 0.25 out of the 4. So if I chose Monday and Tuesday, but I also chose Friday, it would subtract for the wrong answer that I had if I chose that last one. But guess what? You don't have to remember all of that, because here's these little blue words. Sometimes D2L offers these little teeny tiny blue words. If you click on them, they give you a description that kind of helps you understand what they were trying to do there. And that's a really nice resource to have. And we can click save. So now we have 3 questions in our Unit 1 for Math 101. Any questions so far?
Yeah, some other questions have been asked, but they've been all fielded.
Okay. Becky has her hand raised. What would you like to?
Hi, I like the feedback. And I'm sorry if you answered this question already, but when do the students see that feedback? Is it while they're taking the quiz, or is it at the end? Like after they've already submitted it?
And we'll test it out. We'll see what it looks like too. I'm going to go through it as a student too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll test that out, make sure. Any other questions that we need to address now? All right, so now that we've been able to develop our library, let's go ahead and we'll make a quiz. So we'll go back into quizzes and we're going to make a new quiz. And our new quiz, of course, you have to name it. And this can be our sample for January 20th. If you have grading categories, that's where you would choose them. There's lots of information on this page, but let's jump right into getting this quiz populated. It doesn't have any questions. So you have the opportunity to begin adding quiz content. If you click on the button that's blue, because that's the attention, it's drawn right there, you can add a new question just the way that we just did. You can just add it here instead of in a library. You can add a new section the way that we did before, so that you have sections in your quiz. You can also create a question pool, and we're going to come back to that in just a second. From this import, you can browse the question library. You can upload a file, and that's something else that we'll have to talk about in the future. That's a little bit different. An import learning repository. We're going to focus on browsing the question library today. When you click there, you can see these questions. These are those random questions. Remember the ones I had that had just question marks next to them? These are those random ones. But as I scroll down, I can see the sections that I've created. And if this is the quiz that I'm building, and I need to include questions from this economics section, from my Psych 101 and my Psych Unit 2, and my course is a little bit eclectic, yours is much more organized than mine. I know it is. And I'm going to add, for instance, a couple of these random questions. I can click import, and they'll put them all into my quiz for me. So here are the random questions that I chose. Here are my economics section, and it's labeled economics because that was the name of that folder. Here were the questions that are in there. My Psych 101, and here are the questions in there. And my Psych Unit 2, here are the questions in there. I can see that there are 15 points, so that worked out in a nice kind of even number. I can rearrange them if I want a different question to be first. And I can click into the questions if I want to edit them. I can decide to add some more if I want to add another item, or if I need to import more, I can import more. What is disconcerting is there isn't really a save button. I put them there, they're there. There isn't something I have to click save. So don't let that stress you out, because I look for a save button and it's not there, right? But you can click preview also if you want to see what it's going to look like for a student. It makes you go through the start quiz button, but when you start your quiz, you'll be able to see what it looks like. So you can see that I had the questions at the top. Those were those 2 random questions, right? I have these questions here too, building into it. Students can navigate, in case you wondered, by clicking on these different squares. You can practice seeing what it looks like to answer these questions, how it changes by answering those questions. And then you can submit your quiz. I did not finish them all, so it tells me once that I didn't finish. I can still hit submit if I want to. It tells me what my grade was. And then I can say I'm done. So that I can kind of get an idea of what the experience will be like for my students. If I go back into the activity and into the quizzes, I can also build one that I want to show you with the pool. So do you have any questions so far about just drawing from the library in general?
Do you know the answer to this one? It's on here twice, so I'm trying to see if we can find it. To create a question pool from existing quiz questions that you already have. So can you take an existing
That's
quiz
what we're doing next.
and
Perfect
dump it in?
segue.
Perfect.
Perfect segue. All right.
I knew that.
So if we go questions from a pool. So we're going to go ahead and go there, and we're going to add and edit our questions. Inside here, you remember we had add, and we want to create a question pool. So the idea behind the pool is that you're going to create different parts of your test, your quiz that you're creating, that you're drawing from different areas from your library. I'm going to show you what that looks like, but I just want to kind of give you that overview. So my question pool title might be Unit 1. It might be geometrical concepts. It might be whatever that section of my test is. I'm going to pretend that the test I'm building is a bigger test that has 3 units in it. So that's why you're going to see the unit pool says Unit 1, for instance. Now, I have choices. I can say how many questions I'm going to select, this many out of 0, and I can give the points per question. But I like to skip that part first and go to the question library, because if I start to enter a number in there that's 7 from 0, it doesn't really have any meaning, right? So I'm going to go to my question library, and I'm going to look for questions that I want. Now I'm in my question library, and I think I like these questions, and I also like this math one with geometrical concepts that I created. And I'm going to import those. Now it shows me that I imported 5 questions. Out of those 5, I can tell D2L to randomly select 3 of those questions. So I don't care which 3 it is, because those 5 questions are good questions. They all help measure the knowledge of Unit 1. So it doesn't matter to me which question it is, but it's going to randomly select 3 questions. And I can decide that those questions are worth 2 points each. And then I can click Save, and it shows me that it's going to select 3 questions out of 5, and they're worth 2 points each for a total of 6 points. Now, because this is my bigger test, I'm going to add another question pool. This one's going to be Unit 2, of course, you probably have better ways to refer to it. And if you are more explicit in your description, it helps you later on also. Like if this is geometry, I don't know why I'm focused on math today, but here I am. And then if we go to our browse question library, even though that's all about geometry, I'm going to have some site questions in it, though, to tell you the truth. I'm going to have some ice cream questions in there and Skinner. And I'm going to have maybe some intro to math. Oh, that section, look, I already have that in there. I love that the check marks are there to show me which questions I already have in there. So I'm actually going to put this one in there, and I'm going to import those questions. I have 6 questions that I've imported, and I can say, well, I want 3 of those questions, and I want them to be 2 points each. And this
Laura,
gives
can
me
I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
And you may have answered this, and I may have just been overwhelmed by looking at everything, but the question pool title, is that showed to students? Because
No.
my question about that is, like, the question pool title, you have it as Unit 2 geometry, but should it just be like number 2? Like, how does that appear to on the student end? Do they ever see that question pool title?
Let's take a peek at it, because you're right, Molly. There are ways to select when they would be able to see it and when they wouldn't. Let's take a peek at it and see what it looks like. And one of the things I did want to point out, by the way, is if I'm looking at these questions and I say, you know what, this one, the part of the neuron that receives messages from other neurons, we didn't get to that in this unit. I'm going to cover that in the next section. I can get rid of that question so it's not in the pool also. Now I have 3 out of 5. The math automatically changes, and I can click save. And I have these. Let's preview it and see if we see those pool labels. So we're going to go into start the quiz. And I don't see the pool labels. So that's just for the instructor's purposes.
Thank you.
No problem. There are opportunities, though, when you're creating a section, that when you create your new section, you can make that visible to students, which might be a good idea to help scaffold learning for your students, to help them know, well, these are going to be questions about this. These are going to be questions about this. So you have to decide, again, your purpose in your quiz, what you're trying to, the information you're trying to get from them. But yeah, these question pools, that's just for your purpose. Great question, love it. All right, and we can add, let's add one more. Our question pool, again, this is going to be our unit 3. And we're going to browse from our question library. I love it that my check marks are there already, so I can see what types of questions I've already answered or put in here. I go import. Now I've got 11. I want to put 7 of those in here, and I want them to each be worth 3 points. It's a little more complicated unit, so I can do that. And click save. I can see that my quiz is going to be 33 points. Now, if I don't like that, I can make adjustments to these things too. And I can say, well, you know what, actually, unit 1, those are more the basic questions. Maybe I want those to be just 1 point per question. So I can change it. And now look, I've got 30. At least it feels good because it's a round number to me, right? So I can make those changes in a lot of different places. And I can preview that quiz to see what it might look like for students, to get that idea of what those questions look like. And those can be really useful things for instructors. And I do want to point out, there's no save on this. It's just there. I made it and it's good. I don't have to click save. I can go back to the settings. Here's where I save it because I have to save my quiz. Save and close. And there was one thing I forgot when I was practicing. I did want to show you a couple of the other question item types, but I just was going to show you some that I made already. For instance, in these, the nice thing is it does tell you what types of questions you put in here. So if you wanted to see, for instance, we have, this is a Likert style. I had always heard it Likert, and then I took classes that called it Likert, so it's Likert style. But those are the ones that are on the scale. So I have my day's rating. It's an optional title, but I'm going to recommend you put a title in there because look, when I saw it in the list, I was able to recognize easily what my question was. So it helps you in the long run, you take that extra second. I put in my introductory text. This is what the students will see on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. How would you rate these days of the week? Then But on my scale, I chose a different kind of scale. So you want to make sure that those things are consistent, because I'll show you what it looks like. Down here, there's a button we can preview. When we preview it, we see that the question has 1 to 5, but then my scale is actually very unimportant, neutral. It doesn't match. And one of the things I do want to point out, if you use these types of scales and you do use 1 to 5, you use those numbers, make sure that you describe that 1 is the lowest, for instance, if that's how you feel, and 5 is the highest, because sometimes students might look at it and go, oh, that's number 1 for me, that's number 1. And you want to make sure that we're all understanding what we mean by it. So I just want to show you that question type. For instance, there's one also for ordering, for the steps for creating an ice cream. List and order the steps for creating the ice cream. You put in the answers. You say what order they're supposed to be in for correct. We'll preview what it looks like. And now they get to choose the answers. I did provide a hint that this one is old-fashioned, that they can click a hint if they need it, because it has a crank in it. It's not plug it in and turn it on, right? So those are ways, and you can see that it tells me what the answers should be here.
And Laura, on a random question, is there a way to exclude questions that are selected? Often there, Archana gets duplicates if the pool is small.
When you're setting the pool, you set it within the parameters. So each of those questions should be different inside of the pool. If you're finding duplicate questions, then you have duplicate questions where it's drawing from. But what you can do when you are creating that new pool, if you're finding that you do have questions that are very much the same and you don't want those to appear, like they were so close when they were created in the library, then you have that option when you've drawn them to say, oh, these two are almost the same. I'm going to click that X and get rid of it. So now my pool is only drawing from these 3. So that's where you can get rid of ones that you think maybe are too similar, that you don't want them to end up with 2 of those on the same test. Does that help? Did that answer that question?
I think I'll share a sample later on. If I have a pool with 12 questions or something, and if I'm drawing 10 out of them, it appears that it is just drawing a random number and selecting that question number, and I do get duplicates. If the pool is larger, then you have larger to pull from, and usually I don't get duplicates. So I'll share a sample, in a different.
Yeah, I would love to see a sample. And if you want to Zoom with me at another time too, we can do it individually too. Are kind of okay? That's no problem at all.
Thank you.
Because the way it works, it shouldn't pull a question twice.
Yeah, I mean, it appears, it just generates a random number every time and it selects that particular question. It doesn't exclude if the number is selected already. Separately.
Okay, all right. And like I said, we can meet and we can look at your examples and maybe we can help target that.
Thank you.
And Laura, are matching questions able to be automatically graded instead of manually graded?
Yes, because you set up the answers for those. So when you're creating your matching, you're trying to make sure that the matches work. You can have A, and you can have B, and you can have A, and you can have B. Then you can look at those. Let's see what it looks like. Oh, what field did I leave empty? Oh, my tech. Match these. So when we match this, and we say, oh, that matches with 1 and that matches with 2, then they will see how it has these little arrows. It's going to be able to grade those. These blue arrows help me know that it can grade them. One of the things that can help too, by the way, is when you look at a written response. What are the best things about Thursday, for instance, right? You can have different responses to that. And you can allow them for the written response to have different types of responses. So watch when I uncheck these boxes. What they have as a default is a box that they fill in and they can spell check it. If you let them have the HTML editor, that's where they can do some underlining, they can do bullets, they can have some of those options available to them there. They can insert some stuff, things like that. If you enable inserted images and attachments, that's where you can let them add files or record an audio message for you or record a video message for you. So for instance, I might see a value in this for English learners, right? What are the best things about Thursday? They list their things about Thursday, and then they record an audio or a video of them reading it as well, so that I'm testing more than one thing with my item as well. I can choose default points here too, but I really love this part. See this options again? Remember we looked at options before? We can add feedback just like we've seen before, and that's an overall feedback at the end of it. Yes, I love Thursday also, right? We can add a hint. It's not Friday, it's Thursday, you know. We can add short descriptions, but I love this add an answer key, because if you're a department or you're a chair who's developing this pool to help maybe your adjuncts who are pulling it into their class, you can write in here an answer key for approximately what would be good answers to help the scorer score this item. So it helps with that inter-rater reliability, right? So you could write in here that they should say something like, it is almost Friday, right? Maybe those are some of the reasons. And you can have samples in there of what people would look for. And you can edit those as well with your HTML editor. So I really like that idea in there. So when you're talking about an answer key or being able to support each other with what you think are good answers, that's a nice feature.
And Laura, we have us to go back to the matching questions when you have an opportunity to look at the 3 grading options to see if it defaults back to all or none.
Here's the grading, by the way, for your choices. You can decide if it's all or nothing, if they're all equally weighted, if I can get half a point for one, or this is right minus wrong. So if I get one right, but I get one wrong, do I get a 0? Or, I mean, if you have matching of say 5, then it would be distributed amongst those 5. All right, here, I'll show you real quickly what this can look like too. So in my quizzes, I actually had a couple of students take quizzes. See, I've got 0 out of 2. I wanted to show you what it looked like. So I used my question pool for this, and this might kind of speak to, oops, I'm not getting there. Oh, great. So here's my attempt 1. You can see some of those are scored already too. So I need to go in there because I have a couple that might have written responses, things like that. Attempt feedback. You can see that this shows me that's what the answer was supposed to be. And they have 0. But if I decided, well, you know what? We also talked about sunshine. I can give them that credit and say, oh, I can see why they got that one wrong. I can change that. And I can provide feedback too. What are the 3 names? Here we go. We've got these. They got it right. Then I've got the need for love and belonging. True. They got that right. See my check mark? That means they already got it right. And it was auto graded. We've got some more auto graded ones. We get to this one. They got it wrong. I can change it. I can say, well, they can get 1 answer for that because they were close. Here's one though, that it's not auto graded. So it doesn't have a default value either, because this was my written response. What are the best things about Thursday? They gave me, it's almost Friday. And then they also gave me a video. So I can watch the video if I want to. So, you know, they decided to give me that also. Let's close that. And I can say, okay, they were able to get 2 points for that because that's what we talked about in class. So now I've given that. Here's another one that wasn't graded. Describe a polygon, include characteristics, specific terms. It is a multi-sided figure with angles at the vertices. Yep, good job answering that. I can give them their credit. And we have this here. Now when I publish it, you'll be able to see that now they have a C, actually, because they got those written response answers or those ones that I needed to add some grading. Does that help so far? I want you to notice also, though, this is the same quiz, but when my student 2 took the quiz, they had different items because I drew them from the pool. So they were going to be randomly selected. So what is 2 plus 2 was not on the other one, but it's on this one. So because I had a pool, it randomly selects them for the students So 2 students might get 2 different quizzes. But because I chose them from a pool of items that I knew I agreed that they successfully evaluated my students for that unit, then I'm confident in those questions. Does that help?
And Laura, there's another question. Have the answer key. So can you see the answer key when you grade? That way you can quickly provide a copy and paste feedback.
Yes, I thought I would be able to see it, but I am not seeing it. So I will have to investigate that. Here it says, what are the best things about Thursday? The name. Oh, I think I hadn't written one for this one when I made the quiz. That's why I added that with you guys. Otherwise, you probably would be able to see it. We'll test it out though. But the name of the day begins with a diagram. So yay. I like it that they were doing that. Give them credit, publish, and then they get their score.
Interesting question too on data analytics. How can we view metrics? For example, seeing if everyone got the same question wrong without having to look at each individual quiz.
That is an excellent question. Statistics. There we go. I only have the 2 quizzes, so it might not be as robust as you would see with more students. But you can see my user statistics here, overall scores. So what I'm seeing in my class overall, question statistics.
April just dropped a resource guide in for D2L data reference guide, which you guys find really interesting in looking at some of your quiz questions and what the data is driving you to.
And there's a specific page in there that talks about what you can look at in the quizzes and kind of how to access the report that Laura is showing you.
I really like that feature because I used to use Scantron and then we went to D2L. This helped me capture that and make some changes.
And it's nice because you can see the types of answers that can pop up, and you can make some decisions in your course about the types of answers that were provided. I like it too because you can export it to CSV or to Excel. So you can look at it. This is kind of that HTML look. If we export it to Excel, it'll be kind of a sortable spreadsheet that you can use. Are there other questions?
Can I maybe chip in? There's a cool thing that I noticed. If you go to manage quizzes, back out to, yeah, right there. And if you click on a quiz with written response questions, like any, you can pick anyone and just click grade. Just take that little caret and click grade. And that tab with questions, the 3rd tab that says questions. If you click on any of the written response questions, you can see every single submission and just grade them in one go. That's helped me because I get a lot of written response questions for my accounting exams, and it's like cut my grading time in half. And if you save, it just automatically goes to the next submission. And then when you save all of them, it updates all the grades for that specific question. So that might be helpful.
Love that. Thank you.
No problem.
Other tips out there?
Another question for the short answer questions. Is there a way we could include multiple answers that can be marked correctly? I know there's a checkbox for uppercase and lowercase, but in Blackboards, I used to be able to do this answer or this answer or this answers, and all of them would be marked correctly if the student enters any one of those answers. So for example, if I say who's the president right now, if they say, Joe or Biden or Joe Biden, all of them should be marked correct. So it's one question, but they can have an answer, or any of those answers would be correct.
And the short answer, is that what you're talking about in there?
Mm-hmm.
Just put commas, like you put Joe, comma, Joe Biden, comma.
Right.
Like I think, or, hit return, and it'll give you the different options for the correct answer.
Biden. And you can decide if it's going to look at your text, if you want it to be case sensitive.
Okay, right.
Is that what you meant?
Yeah. So I would like to see how this works. Yeah, that would work out greatly because one question. So let's see how it looks.
They type in there, and when grading the question, it would appear as, you would see these options.
But I don't want them to see the options.
No, they don't see them. You see them.
Any of them would be fair. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted.
We had one person suggest that, I don't know if you've tried it or not. Have you looked at fill in the blank questions as an option?
So the fill in the blank would look something like this. Positively speaking, CDI is because. So I'd put these choices in there: amazing, wonderful, challenging, rewarding, because I say so. Those would be the options that would come up. It seems like that people might like a quizzes 2.0 also, to kind of take us to the next level of quizzes too. So this one was really, I think it took some basic things, but went a little bit of a next level because of the pools and the library. But I see a thumbs up that, yeah, it might be nice to have that was one of the things in CCIT we were trying to do, was put levels on the PD so you know what you could expect. So maybe we can look at a quizzes level 2 or level 3 to take you to the next.
There is a vote for level 2.
Excellent.
And as always, check out our resource guides and the links that we provided in the chat. Feel free to reach out to any of your instructional designers. It doesn't matter what campus that any of us are at. You can reach out to Laura, myself. I know April and Carrie are on here. Our job is here to help and troubleshoot a lot of these items. And so feel free to contact us if you need further clarification. This actually brought up another idea and you're like, how do I do this? Reach out anytime.